Hello everyone, this is the psychic prediction video for May 2026. Today's date is currently April 29th, 2026, and these are the visions that I have seen for what is coming up in the next month. In this video I will go over world news, the visions of what I see happening for May regarding world news, as well as Bitcoin, as well as the price of gold and the overall stock market. And I will wrap it up with some general advice for the month coming up here. Again, all of these predictions are for the month of May, within that time period of the beginning of the month to the end of the month. So the first thing that came to me actually was a vision of fires. So I do expect to see many fires in May. Last month I predicted that there would be crazy weather, which has been happening. And so next month I think fires will be the main thing regarding weather. I also got the sense of a nuclear threat coming up in the news, but I did not get the sense that this isn't really related to Iran in the sense of the ability of Iran to develop nuclear capabilities, but this is coming from somewhere else, possibly Israel, I'm not sure. I also saw a vision of Donald Trump typing online posts, but not really having much of an effect with what he's writing anymore, in the way that he's always been posting things online, and it seems to influence people's perceptions a lot, but it seems to be less influential, what he says. Iran seems to also be causing more news to just be more bland, because it's kind of like back and forth to the point where it starts to lose its impact, and the news becomes more bland. It's just kind of like you've heard it before type of situation. So basically what that implies for the month is that I don't really see any major changes happening in the month of May. Although following months I do see much more shifts taking place. For May coming up here, I see Trump, when I tune into his energy, he seems to have a very casual energy to him. I don't see him being very upset or excited relative to other months where I have been seeing that, or also disappointed for the previous prediction I did, but more of just a casual, kind of bland, boring type of energy. The Iran conflict becomes less and less of a focus longer term, is what I'm getting when I tune into that, but I also get the sense that it never really gets fully resolved. It just kind of, becomes less and less of a main focus. I do get the sense that in the longer term, beyond the month, that towards the end of the year of 2026, it could get more intense, and that could start a domino effect leading into the 2027 crash. And this 2027 crash is something that I've predicted for about 4 years now, going way back. And since then, a lot of other people have been starting to say the same thing. Also about 2026 as well. I do believe it will start at the end of 2026, and really we'll see most of the damage in 2027. But going way back, I've been saying that now, and recently it seems to be making a lot of sense with how things are playing out currently. I previously predicted Iran and the surrounding areas around Iran would be at war before this year started. In my prediction for the year 2026, which I did last year, which obviously is now happening. We see Iran and the surrounding area at war. I specifically mentioned Kuwait being attacked, which at the time didn't make sense, considering that Kuwait is mostly aligned with the US. But right now it is actually being attacked very heavily, and it's one of the biggest factors on oil around the world right now, or at least for the US. So that is something that did not make sense when I made the prediction, but now we see it clearly happening. People previously told me that if I was correct about Kuwait being attacked, it would mean that this was going to be a very serious issue. And I would agree that now that that has happened, it does seem to be a very serious issue. I also mentioned last year that the Houthis would be in the news again this year, and now they are joining to fight with Iran. All of this you can find on my 2026 year psychic prediction video. Most of my videos are monthly predictions, although I do make yearly predictions once a year for each year before the year starts. So you can check that out. In that, I also happen to mention something else that's been validated this month in April, which is I said that digital ID would become a big theme in 2026. And just this month, I'll just read the quote from the news. It says, as of April 2026, Apple Wallet has expanded its digital ID features to include age verification for Apple services. And I believe that this is something that they're trying to impose over basically all of the internet, to not only verify people's age, but also verify people's identity and basically track everything you do through the internet, and kind of also make it harder to access certain things on the internet. So that is happening. It's not something I like personally, but regardless, that is happening. And I will also take the time to mention that just because I predict something doesn't mean that I want it to happen. So, if I say something like Trump's popularity is going to go down, which is something that I did predict, it doesn't mean that I hate him or like him or anything. It really has nothing to do with my opinion. I don't say things because that's what I want to happen. That would be really poor predictions on my part. So if I say a politician may experience this or that, that has nothing to do with my opinion about them. Just putting that out there. I get a lot of comments otherwise. Anyways, moving on. Also in the 2026 year prediction video, I also mentioned how I've predicted, well, way before that, but I also predicted it there too, where I talked about it most recently, with the trade routes being disrupted. And that has been something going on. I predicted that before Donald Trump came into office, and I even said that it doesn't matter who becomes president, regardless of who wins, this is a situation. And I saw pirates in the ocean becoming a big deal in the future. And just recently, there's a quote from, in the month of April 2026, Pete Hegseth says, Iran is acting like pirates. This was also after Iran had already accused the U.S. of committing acts of piracy in the ocean. Now, I do believe that this is going to become something bigger than just going on in Iran, but we can see the beginning stages of that happening. Now, initially when I did that reading years ago, I was seeing it mostly happening around Europe, but kind of just all over the world. And so I think this is going to be, unfortunately, become more of the norm just everywhere, not just related to Iran exclusively. So I also said last month that April would have news of glitches in communication. That prediction was kind of a little bit off because I said that I thought it was going to happen in the US. It didn't happen in the US, but what did happen was that in Iran, they broke the record in all of history for the longest nationwide internet blackout. in all of history. So that's, I guess, impressive. But anyways, regardless of the internet blackout, somehow I was able to actually give a reading to someone in Iran, which I thought was pretty cool, and they did have their written perspective on what is happening in their country that I did publish on my Patreon page for everyone to check out. Because people were asking me about what's going on with the people that live there, and I did do a reading on that as well. But I think another great way of getting information is by just asking the people that live there. So that's what I did. And moving on, last month also, sorry, there's a lot of predictions I'm going over from last month. I'm going to get to more of the predictions coming up for May, but we'll get through this real quick here. Last month I predicted that Trump's plans were not working out due to him bluffing. And this is where I got a lot of pushback from people saying that I have Trump derangement syndrome or whatever. Again, this is not about my political opinion. This is about the visions that I have that have nothing to do with my opinion. Okay. So anyways, I also said last month that he would declare victory, but it would actually be a major compromise, and I believe that that is what we are seeing. I also predicted that Trump's popularity would drop after his first year, and here we are, with that being a major thing that we are experiencing in April due to a lot of what people are perceiving as Trump's failures. So Netanyahu, when I tuned into him, I got the sense that for May, he is not getting what he wants. I see him waiting, and he seems frustrated. In the following months, there is more bombing and attacks going on from Israel, and I'm not sure exactly where, but probably Lebanon and maybe Iran. I'm not sure, but either way, he seems happier about it. So it seems like he's basically being restricted from carrying out the actions he wants for the month of May, but after May passes in a couple months or so, it may blow up again, is what I'm seeing. So this seems to escalate, especially around late July through August. So that is a time to watch out for. I don't know, maybe if you're invested in the stock market, maybe be careful around that time. Or obviously, if you live in those areas, that may be attacked. Behind the scenes, when I was tuning into Trump, this is kind of me repeating some of what I said on Patreon, but I just wanted to share some of it here. What I see for Trump working with Israel is that basically the U.S. needs Israel to kind of support them militarily in many ways. And the reason for this is that there are many hidden elite powers operating in the U.S. and working through Israel. You could say it's kind of an extension of the U.S. working through Israel, or you could say it's an extension of Israel working through the U.S., but I would say it's not really either of those necessarily particularly. It's actually bigger than countries. It's more so that there is a group, loosely a group, if you want to call it a group, a movement, whatever you want to call it, the elites, if you want to call it that. These people that basically pull the strings in both countries at the same time, and it's not really one country or the other country, it's bigger than that, which brings me to the next subject, which is this new term I've heard, the Epstein class, as opposed to just Epstein and the people who work for Epstein, but now they're referring to kind of like a bigger network organization as the Epstein class, and I think that is actually a very accurate term to use, because I believe that is a real true thing, the Epstein class, a class of people who basically are kind of in on that or know about it or benefit from it second-handedly in some sort of way, or just are part of the scene and they just keep their mouth shut because that's what everyone else does. Either way, the Epstein class, what I get about that works beyond borders again. So despite the news trying to associate Epstein with a specific country, saying that he was Israeli intelligence or U.S. intelligence or whatever it may be, I don't think he was any country's intelligence. It was bigger than that, although he was working with some of the people that were also working in Israeli intelligence and U.S. intelligence, sure, but ultimately he wasn't working for those in particular. So going back to some other information that I came across, I don't know, like 3 years ago or something like that, maybe less, I'm not sure. But either way, I did a blind reading on Trump, meaning I didn't know who he was, or I didn't know who I was reading when I was reading it. It's a remote viewing protocol where you basically pull a random digit number and it's associated with a name or something that you're reading and you don't know what it is. And I have hundreds of them, so I don't know which one I'm pulling from. You're just basically like kind of picking a card and seeing what's on it. But before I look up the name to see what's associated with that number, I just do the reading. And that's how it's a blind reading, and I don't know who it is that I'm reading until after I finish the reading. And that way I cut out my own bias and preconceived ideas for the most part, at least. Although I do believe that even if you don't know who you're reading, there is a level of your own subconscious mind that does still have a little bit of a filter it sees through regardless. And so it cuts out most of your preconceived consciousness, at least, but there's a little bit of your kind of subconscious filter that you still see through regardless, even if you're doing blind remote viewing protocol. But anyways, and by the way, most of what people call remote viewing nowadays is just a psychic reading. They're just trying to make it sound fancy by calling it that, but most of them don't even really use this protocol. But I think they should, and I think people should understand what it is. But anyways, I did a blind reading on Donald Trump on my Patreon maybe 2 years ago or so, where I came to the conclusion in the blind reading, not knowing who I was reading, that this person was working for multiple organizations that were slightly at odds with each other and working with them at once. And one of those organizations was Israel, and the other was a unknown European organization. And then there was one that he was working for before that, which I think may have been the U.S. government, or I don't know, not the U.S. government, sorry, I take that back, but something associated with the U.S., some sort of organization. Maybe it was the Epstein class, I don't know, but it was a blind reading, so I don't know. But regardless, that's how it showed up for me, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Also, really quickly, while I'm on the subject, I do have hundreds of other blind readings on politicians and many other big names, people making big claims, conspiracy theorists, etc., on my Patreon page as part of my psychic reading encyclopedia, which you can check out for free with a 7-day free trial. And if you want to pay for the full month, you can continue and pay only $5 a month to have access to the entire blind reading of important people, psychic reading encyclopedia. Or you can join the higher tiers as well too. And also I have a free Patreon membership level as well that never costs any money ever, and I just occasionally share some free content there, so sign up for that too if you want. And by the way, give this video a thumbs up, because why not? You might as well. So, anyways, Trump is focusing more on China in May, is what I was seeing. I also see more ships being sent out into the ocean from the US, but I don't get the sense that anything really massive changes from it. Now, of course, there's going to be changes. There's always changes, but nothing like drastic, nothing that, not like a big game changer. However, the following months after May, I see a lot of activities taking place with boats, indicating some sort of conflict in the sea, which may actually expand beyond Iran's borders and become bigger than just Iran, is what I was getting. Trump seems to be writing a letter and waiting for a response before taking much further action, or at least that was a vision I had. It may be symbolic more than literal, I'm not sure, but it was as though he was writing a letter and then waiting for the response. And this seems to be connected to the secret European organization that I was talking about before that came up in the blind reading. Some sort of organization associated with Europe. It's not that he's waiting for a response from Israel. It's a different organization, is what I was getting. So there are many hidden agreements that Trump operates under that is not public knowledge, and I believe that that is what explains a lot of his recent erratic behavior and contradictory statements recently that people have become much more aware of recently. Okay, going back to one more thing I predicted last month. I said that it was going to be the kind of start of a revolutionary resistance forming, which I described as being like the top-down pyramid rulership kind of starting to break apart, and people really like on a more mass level becoming aware of that and starting to resist that, and that it is going to have less to do with the traditional left versus right paradigm, and it's more just a coming together of different people from the left and the right. And since I made that prediction, there has been a lot more people kind of basically condemning Donald Trump from the right and the left, and I think that I think that plays into it, but also I think there's just a lot of people starting to realize that some of the people that they thought were the alternatives to this power dynamic are truly not, which, I've been saying that since the very beginning. Many people have attacked me for that, but here we are. So I do see this continuing into May, where there's more of this binding together of people who are not necessarily left-wing or right-wing. They're just a bigger collective resistance forming that isn't tied to any specific left or right wing. And I think that is a very good thing, because I believe that the left and the right wing are both heavily manipulated, and the only way to really overcome a lot of the corruption is to kind of move beyond that paradigm. And I think that's what's happening, and we will be seeing more of that in May. So another thing coming up for me was expanding consciousness for May and the purging of old behaviors. This is on an energetic level for people personally, and you may also see this in politics as well. So what's going on is that the past will basically be exposed. So there's a lot of things from the past that will be coming up on a personal level, but also on a political level. But instead of vengeance, we will move on to higher frequencies rather than seeking revenge for people who have maybe done things that are wrong. I see a lot of awareness of wrongdoings becoming exposed, but there not being much punishment for them. So this may seem bad to some people, but I don't particularly think that it's necessarily a bad thing. However, people will stop supporting the bad habits of their inner lives as well as their political landscape. So people won't necessarily be going out and punishing people, but people will stop supporting that type of activity. So it does seem positive in that sense. So May seems to have a very positive energy for spiritual growth, and that seems to also be mixed with very challenging times. So it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. The economy seems to be showing signs of a looming disaster, but it really doesn't seem to become a major issue until the following months after May. So give it a couple months, and I think that will become a much bigger issue. Moving on to Bitcoin. So my long-term prediction for March, my long-term prediction that I made a long time ago regarding March being the month where the downtrend stops going down, basically, and it starts to kind of head upwards a little bit. Basically, the downtrend stops after March, is what I said. And last month, I said I saw it going upwards with volatility until June or July, where there could be some more trouble, and I think that this may be associated with some of the situations going on in the Middle East that I discussed earlier. May, in particular, seems to be a mixed bag of up and down for Bitcoin. But, so May just seems like it could go up and down, both directions. But overall, it seems to be more positive. But not really great, but not really bad either. The second half of the month seems to do better than the first half of the month for Bitcoin. As far as the stock market goes, last month I said that the stock market would start off going down and then recover after the first week. By the time that, and after making that original prediction, by the time that the month actually started, it had already gone down earlier than I expected, but it did recover significantly in the first week, and the following week afterwards. So it did do the same thing, it just happened a little earlier than I anticipated. And moving on forward, what I see for the stock market in May is I do see a overall slightly downward motion, but mostly sideways, just slightly downward overall. Gold, for the price of gold, last month I said it would dip down before rallying around June, which is still a little ways out. Since I said that, it did dip down. It did dip down, but it didn't go down from where it did go down. It did dip down, as I thought, but it didn't go down as far as I thought it would have gone. Regardless, I see that some of the dip I expected in April is still to come in May. So it did go down, but it didn't go down as far as I thought it would. And now what I'm seeing is that it will eventually go that far down, but it's going to take until May for it to go down that far. So expect slightly lower prices in gold through May. So May, energetically, is a great month for connecting with others and fostering a higher level of consciousness based in understanding and acceptance, while also digging up and throwing away that which no longer serves you. So it's kind of a almost contradiction of coming together and then separating that which no longer serves you. But it's a coming together of higher vibrations, and in order to do that, you kind of have to let go of the lower vibrations. So it's not a contradiction, but it may sound like one. May is a bad month for having too long of a to-do list or worrying about details. Personal goals are also not the focus of this month overall. And the general advice for the month is spend money wisely, because if you don't, bad times will hit you further down the road. So, when that came through, I assumed that to mean that things are not going to be that great, economically speaking, after May, which also resonates with many of my other previous predictions. And that's pretty much it for the predictions, but I do want to also mention that I have hundreds of blind readings on Patreon and hundreds of crypto altcoin predictions and stocks, as well as most recent blind readings I've done for in April were on Richard Bandler, neuro-linguistic programming, and I did a blind reading on Enrique Lores, CEO of HP and related to zero gravity. Also for the month of April, I posted on my Patreon page, which you can have access to for free for 7 days with a 7-day free trial. What I posted was the future of Israel and how it will change to a less violent nature around 2029 or so. Not necessarily 2029 specifically, but somewhere around there. Further insight into Iran and how Trump is lying to the US and why he is doing what he is doing currently at this time. A reading into Melania Trump and her loose but real ties to Epstein. What's really going on with the Vatican versus, well, there's this battle between the Vatican and Trump and J.D. Vance, but many are saying there's a battle between the Vatican and the Knights of Templar, and that is expressed through Trump and many of those people. I did a reading into that. And I also did a reading into David Wilcock's death, which I see as being a suicide due to mostly financial reasons causing massive depression. Despite what others have said, I did not get the sense that this was due to some sort of secret technology used against him. I just did not see that being the case. Trump's latest attempted shooter, I do not see being anything more than just an angry individual, despite previous attackers that I have done readings on and seen as being tied to intelligence agencies in some ways, even though not directly tied to, but there is some connection there of kind of being encouraged or being allowed to do what they're doing, at least. So you can check those out if you're interested in those previous older readings on those shooters or any of the most recent stuff, and I will be posting more stuff this month, of course. If you've watched to the very end, I always appreciate that, and you can always give this video a thumbs up too. I'd always appreciate that even more. And subscribe for monthly predictions every month before the month starts. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.